Just a quick caveat before you watch this video. I do sometimes interchange uh, learned helplessness and limiting belief. The main difference between a limiting belief and learned helplessness is the limiting belief is what gets you to learned helplessness, and you are at learned helplessness when you feel it is literally impossible and you stop trying. Whereas a limiting belief is something that you believe, but you still sort of act against it. You're still trying to fight the fight, sort of thing. Hopefully that makes the rest of the video a bit clearer, as it seemed to interchange a little bit as I was editing. Hopefully this makes it clearer for you. Enjoy. Hello everyone, welcome back. So today's video is going to be on limiting beliefs and something called learned helplessness. So there's a good quote that all knowledge begins with a definition of terms. So we're going to start with the definition of learned helplessness. Okay, so learned helplessness is when you have tried something that's quite stressful or quite difficult again and again and still not had much success with it, and so you begin to believe that it is impossible for you to do this thing, and so you have learnt that you are helpless to achieve this goal or whatever it is. If you look back at my old example in the last video, if you feel like you've tried everything and can't lose weight, you've learned that you are helpless in the journey of fat loss. Now, the thing with learned helplessness is, regardless of how objectively true that is, the fact that you believe it will make it have a massive impact on your life. So when people say, I've always wanted to be an actor, but I'm not good enough, that's learned helplessness to some extent. Sometimes you don't even need to do the act to get it. Sometimes just having it drilled into you can make you believe it, because learned helplessness isn't necessarily learning it from experience, it's just learning to be helpless. So this can come when, similarly to what I said about self-fulfilling beliefs, if you have a limiting belief that stops you from taking much action, and you've had that self-fulfilling for a little while, it eventually turns into a learned helplessness, because of every time you do it, you get a little bit less confident that it's going to happen, sort of thing, and it gets it until you've got no belief that it's going to happen at all. I can't do it. When you say that, you've probably got some sort of learned helplessness. The problem is you need to maintain faith in yourself, in your abilities to do whatever it is you are seeking to do. There's a massive worldwide problem with self-confidence. Now, obviously, there are some obvious people that don't seem to have any lack of self-confidence at all. But in general, most people have low confidence. Not always presenting, though. The thing, like, I may come across quite confident in these videos, but I wouldn't consider myself overly confident. It's just where I've sort of made these realisations, I then know that, well, if I continue the behaviour, it's going to make the belief more strong. Whereas every time that I break that thought that I can't be confident or I can't public speak and stuff like that, every time you do it, it feeds it. Every time you don't do the thing you're scared of, but every time you do it, it goes the opposite direction. So every time I make one of these videos, I will gain a little bit of confidence from it, just from the fact of doing it. And this is why it's so hard to break these sort of mental barriers that we build or collect as we grow up. Unfortunately, a lot of learned helplessness comes from our parents a lot of the time, or our colleagues and people around us that have already had experiences or negative experiences, and they'll give us information regarding that. Oh yeah, I tried that once, it was shit. Excuse my language. And then we either if we trust that person, if it's our mum or dad, we're quite, inclined to believe them. If your mum or dad say, "Oh, don't bother starting a business or anything like that. It's too risky. Go and get yourself a decent job." That's because they've learnt to be helpless, and that it's too hard to go and do a business, and that you should just settle, basically. So one thing to keep in mind, although a learned helplessness doesn't help you grow, and in fact can limit you quite a lot in life, when people give you this information that leads to a learned helplessness, they do it out of care, because at some point you do need to know when to stop. Now, finding this line is very hard. It varies, and sometimes it does move. Now, when it comes from your parents or your friends or family, um, it does come from a place of care, because they're worried that you will spend years of your life trying to do this thing, like start a business, um, to no end, basically. So you can see how, because they have that learned helplessness and think it's impossible, they don't want to see you try and fail. They don't want to see you go through the struggle that they may have gone through themselves. So it does come from a place of caring, and that's why it's very hard to sort of talk about and stuff like that, and to recognize, because you sort of have to take advice that is trying to show compassion for you and realize that it's actually damaging you. Um, it's complicated and it's hard. The biggest thing is that we should all use our own lives to try, because even things that don't work for other people may work for you. Everyone's individual. The problem is we forget this. So, a big part of it is self-awareness, especially in regards to things like starting a business. It's all possible for anyone, really, but is it a question of whether it's possible, or is it a question of whether you as a person want to take on the obvious struggle that it is to do it? Yes, it's possible, but it is going to be hard. So this is where you have to sort of choose where you want to invest your time in. Although we can pick up learned helplessness from the people around us, we shouldn't think they're trying to harm us or think negatively of them because of that, because it does come from a place of caring. Okay, it tends to happen to this a lot. Like I said in the previous video, when you're trying to help someone but they believe they can't be helped, they get defensive, and because it feels like you're trying to sort of say they're wrong or something like that. It's the exact same sort of thing. It's just miscommunication across the board. Okay, so we sort of know what learned helplessness is, how we might pick it up as we grow up, or from our experiences as we grow up. So, how do we identify what beliefs are these limiting ones? You'd think they're obvious. Not always. Not always. It's usually whenever you say things like "I can't" or the word "impossible." Um, what is impossible? You go back far enough. This phone I'm talking to you on was impossible. Flying was impossible. It's just a matter of time. Now, a good easy way to identify a limiting belief is, does the belief stop you from taking action? Okay, so we're going to talk a bit about how you might be able to fight learned helplessness. Say you've found it, but it's quite a strong one. You're like, okay, I can see that I believe it's not possible for me, but that's pretty ingrained, I'm 50, I've been living for a long time, I've tried a lot of times, and it's just not happened. So that's quite ingrained in there. Now, the biggest help that I've found personally is trying to pinpoint where that learned helplessness come from. Did it actually come from your experiences, or did it come from someone else? A lot of the time, most of the ones that we hold will come from people telling us, but the ones that we get from experience are somewhat a little bit harder, because the ones that you've got from someone else, you can sort of say, okay, they told me. I haven't actually seen any physical evidence myself. So it's a bit easier to get rid of that limiting belief. Things from your experiences are a little bit harder. You have to objectively look at it and say, okay, I know I did try a lot. Maybe there was something I was doing wrong. And a really good, effective way I've found personally of removing some of the learned helplessness from trying things and stuff like that is to find someone who can be somewhat of a mentor, someone who maybe has achieved what you want to achieve, has a similar struggling circumstance, like abusive fathers or stuff like that. If you can find someone who's got past that and succeeded, then you will feel more motivated to do it. And then that will be able to, just that motivation to do that action, just that action will help slowly whittle away at that belief. Another good way, and arguably I'd say is probably the best use of like mental health groups and stuff like that, is to ask someone else about their opinion. We don't like listening to other opinions, especially when they contradict our beliefs. However, this is the best way to grow because you're getting that input. People seem to forget that we as humans have only got so far because we have managed to work together and animals can't, not to the extent that we can. They don't have the mental capacity. But, humans, we can come together, we can discover things. This person's got this perspective, this person's got this perspective, and when they meet, wonderful things are created. Now, be careful with this. Obviously, there will be some people, especially in mental health groups, that have a similar learned helplessness to you, and so they will agree with you. You have to ignore these people. You have to keep in mind that your objective is to get rid of this belief because you know that it's limiting you. It's affecting your life in a massive way, and it could be the gate to what could be your perfect life. So yeah, ask other people, and sometimes the way someone else describes something or explains something makes it easier for us to understand. I've had a lot of people message me over the last few days saying that just the way I've explained things in my videos has helped them to understand their own thoughts a little bit better, and that is 100% the main reason I'm making these videos. It's because these realizations that I talk about, I've done, I am doing every day. Mental health is a daily, habit, just like exercise. That's why I feel they're both very much in connection with each other. If you're working out every day, that's fine. But if you're stressing yourself out every day as well, you're also causing quite a bit of stress and damage to your body. Okay, so if you've made it all the way to the end, thank you for listening. It could have got a bit confusing. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, but hopefully you understand what learned helplessness is. It comes from limiting beliefs, self-fulfilling themselves until you accept that it is impossible. Impossible is an excuse. Now, people don't like the word excuse, but anything that stops you from taking an action is an excuse by definition. But we get very triggered by that sort of thing. Try not to. I know it's hard. Like, anger is definitely one of the things that I have struggled with over the years. But if you can get past it, magical things. So, if there is anything you can think of that you think might be a limiting belief, or a learned helplessness that you have, please comment below. I'd love to maybe try and highlight why it may not be true. The best thing we can do for our self-confidence is realise that we are all human and quite capable of the same stuff, and then finding someone else who has already done it. The big thing about the first, the guy who ran whatever it was, the fastest mile, the whole point was that no one did it before him, because every doctor said your heart would explode. They had learned that it was impossible until he did it, and now hundreds of people do it all the time because they know it's possible. No longer did humans have that learned helplessness that we are incapable to run that quickly. Now there are plenty of examples. Try and look for some. If you're struggling to look inside yourself and see some, notice them in other people, because when you can notice them in other people, then you can start to recognize them in yourself. It's that whole thing of you are the 5 people you surround. So if you notice something in someone else, it's likely because you know it in yourself. The whole idea that when we get angry at people, it's because they are doing a behaviour that we are scared that we might do ourselves. But that's a whole nother topic. Sorry for rambling. We'll stop that here. I hope to see you in the comments, or you can message me on my WhatsApp. I'll leave the number in the description of this video. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.